Hi everyone. I would like to say a few things about critical thinking in general before I start talking about the famous forms of valid arguments. So, critical thinking is not just one skill, but it takes a variety of skills, and those skills take longer than 6 weeks or a semester or a year to hone and make your own, but they take a lifetime. So I'm hoping this class will be just a jumping off point for you to start building your toolbox of critical thinking skills. So critical thinking can be thought of as a toolbox, and some of the skills that we're learning in this class are like tools in the toolbox. Here we go. So here's some of the tools. So we've talked about some cognitive biases, so I've likened that to a wrench for no particular reason. So knowledge of cognitive biases like optimism bias, planning fallacy, sunk cost fallacy, confirmation bias, and some of the others that we'll be talking about this semester. So knowing those, knowing when your brain is programmed to lead you the wrong way will help you recognize those biases and prevent them in the future. So knowledge of cognitive biases is one tool in your toolbox. Another tool, I liken this to a level, no particular reason, is knowledge of reliable sources. So in our day and age, knowledge has become so specialized that there's no way for us to know everything. So and you can't know everything, and you would go crazy if you tried to. So so when my electrical burns out, I don't try and figure out how to fix it myself. I call a repair person. My garage door broke, and the guy that came in there was talking about the difference between nylon and metal wheels on my garage door, and I have no idea whether one's better than another. You just have to trust. You could do a basic search to see if the business is trustworthy from the Better Business Bureau, but you just can't possibly know all there is to know. So we have to know where to go for reliable sources. So our knowledge of the weather, our knowledge of, I work here in the dental hygiene building, the best way to clean teeth or the way teeth are supposed to work, that's not something that I can spend my time learning. So you have to know who to go to, who to ask. So that's an important part of critical thinking. I think the most important part, or I've become convinced over the few semesters that I've taught this, is an engaged system too. So that's in Daniel Kahneman's, I'll hold the book up next to my face, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. An engaged system two is knowing when to use your system two, and using it to check up on your system one. It's not using your system two all the time. I think I touched on this a little bit when I gave the lecture on systems 1 and 2. You would drive yourself crazy if you tried to use your system two all the time. System 1 works well for many things, but for critical thinking, for assessing difficult problems, assessing probability, trying to figure out what the best deal is, you need your system 2 for that. So being engaged, being curious, using your system 2 is the probably the most important part of critical thinking. I likened that to a saw, for no good reason again. And then there's intellectual virtues. Those are I don't want to say impossible to teach. I haven't figured out how to teach those yet. But things like humility, so not thinking that you know everything is humility. Someone who comes into the class and thinks they know everything is not going to take the time to learn. Carefulness, curiosity, those are all intellectual virtues. And then I've listed here knowledge of deductive logic and inductive logic, and that's what we're studying in this unit. So far, the stuff that we've studied have been, I guess, easy concepts to comprehend. I've scaled back the amount of work you have to do in this deductive and inductive logic section because I think it's complicated for some people to wrap their heads around. So I'm giving you more exercises and more time, relatively more time to digest this. So deductive logic and inductive logic is about how premises or claims, the relationship between premises and claims to the conclusion that someone is making. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Okay, so we're going to talk about deductive validity, and I'm going to teach you something called the famous form method for determining deductive validity. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Okay, but first let's do a little review. Let's talk about being reasonable. So reasonable people change their minds on the basis of arguments. So this is a review from last week. We talked about from chapter 1 in your textbook. Let me hold it up. This textbook. Chapter 1, The Power of Critical Thinking. They talked about what arguments are and the components of arguments and some indicator words for knowing where the premises are and the conclusions. So what are arguments? Well, reasonable people change their mind on the basis of argument. Here's an example of an argument. If it's making a clanking sound, then it's broken. If it's broken, it needs to be fixed. Therefore, it's making a clanking sound, then it needs to be fixed. There we go. There's our smart thinker there. Therefore, my car needs to be fixed. So an argument basically takes some claims that you believe and shows that they imply a conclusion that's true. So here we've got a claim. If the thing, your washing machine or car or whatever, is making a clanking sound, then it's broken. So that's a claim. What makes it a claim is it's a statement that can be true or false. If it's broken, then it needs to be fixed. That's also a claim. You might argue with that and say that, well, that's not true. Broken things don't need to be fixed. It's fine for things to be broken. Like I'm telling myself, I just broke my cell phone screen, and I'm telling myself that it's okay. Broken things don't need to be fixed. So you could argue with any of these. So these are claims. Premise 1 and premise 2 are claims that can either be true or false. But let's say we believe them. I believe this guy here believes premise 1. He believes premise 2. If he believes premise 1 and premise 2, and this inference is a valid one, then he is obligated in a deductive argument to believe the conclusion. And incidentally, this famous form is called hypothetical syllogism. So if you believe the premises and they logically imply, if the logical implication is valid, that means it's not broken. The two true, you can't see where I'm pointing. The two true claims equal the conclusion. Therefore, you should believe the conclusion. So a part of being reasonable is accepting the conclusion. If you affirm this, 1, if you affirm 2, and the inference is a valid one, then you are obligated in a deductive argument to believe the third. Okay. So this is, again, is a review about logical structure. Some logical patterns, I forgot the N. Some logical patterns or forms are better than others. So some logical structures guarantee their conclusions, guarantee that their conclusions will be true, and some do not. So if you put true premises into a valid form, you will get true premises out. And that is called a valid argument. So in the Kevin de la Plante's lectures, he uses this analogy of a funnel, and I think it's excellent. So a valid argument is like a funnel that has no holes in it. It is a sound working funnel. A valid argument is a good sound funnel. And if you put the truth into a sound funnel, true premises, you're going to get true premises out. So you can assess the funnel independently of what you put in the funnel. And the funnel here, Kevin de Plante says that the funnel is being compared to a valid argument form. So validity is how good is this funnel? So questions about whether an argument is valid or invalid are all about the form of the argument, the how good this funnel is, the working order of the funnel itself, and not about what you put into it. So questions about the validity are just about the funnel itself and not about what you put into it. What you put into it are the claims, and that can be likened to oil or milk or honey or whatever you stick in the funnel. So, so you can separate out the logical structure of the argument from the details of what the argument is about. So if for math-minded people, the logical structure of the argument is the formula. It's the A, B's, and C's. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. You can plug in whatever you want to those letters. The logical structure is the formula. It is the funnel. So when you ask about the validity of the argument, it doesn't matter what the content about. Soundness is different. Soundness takes into consideration both the validity and the content. So when we're talking about soundness, we talk about how good the funnel is and how good the stuff is you're putting in. So if you put in sour milk into this funnel, it's not going to be a sound process. You've got a good funnel, but you've put yucky stuff in. Okay. All right, so this is the way things can go in arguments. So here's a funnel, and the funnel, the good funnel here, the funnel that's whole, is being likened to a valid logical form. You put the truth in, so you put in true claims, true premises, and you're going to get the truth out. And this whole process, the whole thing, the valid form or the funnel, plus what you put into it. So the high quality oil, the high quality honey. We don't, that sounds gross. Oil and honey. Whatever you put in, if it's good stuff, you're going to get good stuff out if you put it into a valid form. Now let's look here. This funnel here is an invalid form. It's a formula that's broken. So think about a broken mathematical formula, a bad mathematical formula. You may put good stuff in. You may put in the highest quality oil, and it'll leak out. You can get falsity. Falsity could come through. The truth leaks out, and what you get is falsehood. Or sometimes by accident, the truth might just make it through and not fall out the sides. So the invalid form is broken. You may by accident get a true conclusion. Oops. You may by accident get a true conclusion, or just by accident to the falsehood. So this invalid form is unreliable. It's a bad funnel. You don't want to use it. So today's lecture is going to focus on telling the difference between good funnels and bad funnels. Okay. So there's 4 ways to tell if an argument is valid or invalid. Here they are. The first one is the counterexample method. And there's pros and cons to each method. So the counterexample method is that if the argument is invalid, you can come up with a counterexample. So you can think of a way in which the premises could be true and the conclusion is false, and that would show the argument's invalid. But this is the con. So it works with everything, but the problem is sometimes it's hard to think up counterexamples because the argument may be about some topic you're unfamiliar with. And second, if the argument is valid, you're not going to find a counterexample. So you only can come up with counterexamples for invalid arguments, and if the argument's valid, you could be trying all day to find an argument. This happened to me in a logic class. The assignment was to prove this argument invalid, and I spent all night trying to do it, and it turned out it was valid. So if it's valid, you'll never find a counterexample. Okay, then there's the Venn diagram method. I really like this method. I find it intuitive, and some students really like it. But other students, it seems like no matter how hard they try, they just can't get it. And since this is such a short class, we're going to skip that. I had students crying last semester. I had students reliving PTSD from the war, trying to figure out the Venn diagram method. So I do think it's pretty easy. It works all the time. But if most people can't figure it out, then it's no good. The famous form method is really easy. You memorize the famous forms of argument. In a more advanced logic class, and actually the other good thing about this is you memorize these famous forms, you can go take Introduction to Logic, and the Introduction to Logic would build on the famous form method, and you'd be able to use that going forward. The drawback of the famous form method is that I'm only going to teach you 4 famous forms, and they're way more valid argument forms than 4. So you're only going to learn 4 in this class. So the good thing about that is that if you take another logic class, they're going to reteach you the 4 famous forms plus others, and it'll help you and how to derive things from those 4 forms. But it'll also give you a feel of what a valid argument is. So you memorize these 4 forms. Oh, the 4 forms, I think I initially in some places said 5, but I cut it back to 4 because there's only 4 in the back of your book. So this is the leaf back page of your book, and it says common argument forms, valid argument forms, and then it has 2, I call them pretenders. It says here invalid arguments forms. So here's the 4 valid, here are 2 that are invalid, that are pretenders of modus ponens and modus tollens. So the 4 forms are in the back of your book. And then finally there's the rule method, and students really like this. You memorize a list of 10 rules. But the big drawback is that you're not going to remember those 10 rules after the class ends, and I want you to be able to take what you learn in this class and apply it to your life to become a better critical thinker. So the famous form method will most likely do that. Okay, so before we go on to talk about the famous forms, let's talk about why it matters whether we know if an argument is valid or invalid. So Daniel Kahneman addresses this in, I don't remember which chapter, it was one of the first chapters of the book. Maybe it's in the lazy control. Okay, well it's in one of these first chapters in Thinking Fast and Slow, and he lays out this syllogism. It says, all roses are flowers, some flowers fade quickly, therefore some roses fade quickly. And he gave this question to university students all over, and this is what he has to say about it. Kahneman says that the vast majority of college students endorse the syllogism is valid because they endorse the conclusion. So students read this and they say all roses are flowers, some flowers fade quickly, therefore some roses fade quickly. They see the conclusion, they say, oh yeah, well yeah, some roses do fade quickly. They like the conclusion and they say, yeah, that must be valid. Turns out this is not a valid argument, because it could be all roses are flowers, some flowers fade quickly. It could be that the roses are not in the group of flowers that fade quickly. The roses are not part of that sum. So this is not a valid argument. But students endorse it as valid because they like the conclusion. And this is a dangerous sort of way, it's a dangerous way to reason. It's not a critical way to reason, to endorse an argument just because you like the conclusion. And you can think about this in political context. Someone gives a conclusion you like, and you will endorse anyway. So this is how our minds work, our biased minds. We like the conclusion, and we will check off on any method of getting to that conclusion. So we don't want people believing arguments just because they like the conclusion. You want to be able to dissect the argument and say, hey, look, that doesn't follow. All roses are flowers, yes. Some flowers fade quickly, yes. But how do we know that roses are part of the group of flowers that fade quickly? roses could be outside the circle of the flowers that fade quickly. So that's what a critical thinker would do, would dissect the argument and say, hey, look, that conclusion doesn't follow. All right. So that's why knowing if arguments are valid and invalid are important in critical thinking. So let's talk about the famous forms. Here they are. Here are the 4 famous forms we're going to learn. Modus ponens, modus tollens, disjunctive syllogism, and hypothetical syllogism. And again, they're in the back of your book. There we go. Okay. So here's modus ponens. Modus ponens is if P, then Q, P, then Q. It's really simple. It's really straightforward. It's one of those things that is so easy. It's hard. Although I think it's so easy, it's easy. You're just saying the same thing twice in a row. If P, then Q, if P, then Q. If P, then Q, P, therefore Q. Okay, so let me give you an example. If P, it's in the red, if you complete all the degree requirements by May 15th, then Q, then you can graduate. And now I'm going to say, so this is something that might be written in the college catalog handbook. And then I'm going to affirm P. Damien completed the degree requirements by May 15th. P obtains. Therefore, what can you infer from this? Then Damien is going to graduate. Okay, so this first part, the P part, is called the antecedent. The Q part is called the consequent. So the antecedent comes first. If you complete all the degree requirements by May 15th, antecedent, then consequent, antecedent, consequent. Okay, so it's just saying the same thing twice. Modus ponens. Okay, it's valid. Okay, let me just, this is a valid argument form. Let me just address soundness really fast. So we said that if there's this valid form and each of the premises are true, then the argument is sound. If the form is valid and each of the statements is true. So suppose it turns out that I'm saying, yeah, Damien completed the degree requirements by May 15th. But suppose I'm lying. That would make the argument would still be valid, but it would be unsound. So the form is a good one, but it would be unsound if it turns out that Damien did not complete the degree requirements by May 15th, as I'm saying here. Okay, so conditional reasoning, here we go. So conditional reasoning is used by modus ponens, modus tollens, and hypothetical syllogism. Conditional is, any conditional is an if-then statement. So here we go. If the bank is open, then I can deposit my check. So this is conditional reasoning. If this part obtains, then I can do this. If this first part is called the antecedent, the bank is open. The consequent is I can deposit my check. Okay, so I'll be referring to the antecedent and consequent here. The antecedent is the first part. Consequent is the second part. Okay. Okay, so here is another example of modus ponens. If Smokey the Bear is a mammal, then it has warm blood. Smokey the Bear is a mammal, therefore Smokey the Bear has warm blood. So here's another example. It's modus ponens. If this first part obtains, if A, then B, A, therefore B. Okay, and by the way, you can use any, it's just like algebra, you can use any letters here. Philosophers use P, Q, P's and Q's and A, B's and C's, but it doesn't matter. You can use X, Y, Z, M, N, O, P, whatever. So if Smokey the Bear is a mammal, then it has warm blood. Smokey the Bear is a mammal, therefore Smokey the Bear has warm blood. So that's another instance of modus ponens. Okay, and we talked again about how, we talked above about how form and content can be separated. So this argument, the validity of the argument is based on its structure, its form, how good the funnel is. So this, if it's an A, then it's a B. It's an A, therefore it's B. as long as that structure stays in place, it doesn't matter what you plug in for A and B. You can plug in anything, and the argument will remain valid. Now, soundness is a different matter. It has to be true to be sound, but we're just talking about validity here. No matter what you plug in for A, no matter what you plug in for B, the argument will stay valid because it's just about the form, not about the content. Validity is just about how good that funnel is. So here's an example. So we're just going to plug in any old thing. We're going to plug in Griebach for A and Scroon for B. If it's a Griebach, then it's Scroon. Gronk is a Griebach, therefore Gronk is Scroon. So if it's a P, then it's a Q. P, therefore Q. We just made up nonsense words, plugged them in, and it's still valid. If it's a Griebach, then it's Scroon. It's a Griebach, therefore it's Scroon. Okay, so again, that is valid, but it is not sound because there's no such things as Gronks and Griebachs. Oh, there's Gronk. He says he's Scroon. Okay, valid or invalid? Okay, what about this one? If Steve is a thief, then he's a murderer. Steve is a murderer, therefore Steve is a thief. Is this valid or invalid? Does this demonstrate the good form of modus ponens, or is something gone astray? There's the thief/murderer, Steve. It's actually invalid. Why is it invalid? Well, it's using this modus ponens lookalike that is called affirming the consequent. Affirming the consequent. If P, then Q. Yeah, affirming the consequent. If Steve is a thief, if P, then Q. Modus ponens would say P. It's affirming the antecedent. P, then Q, right? But this one says if P, then Q, Q, then P. And that is actually invalid. If Steve is a thief, then he's a murderer. Steve is a murderer, therefore he's a thief. So this doesn't follow because this says that all thieves are murderers. It does not say that all murderers are thieves. So this is actually an invalid argument. And again, if the argument's invalid, then it's automatically unsound. This is the example of affirming the consequent. And for those of you who are taking the LSAT or have taken the LSAT is the exam to get into law school. There's a section on the test that tests your ability to tell the difference between modus ponens and the modus ponens lookalike, affirming the consequent. So there will be things like this on the test, and you have to say valid or invalid. So here you go. Studying for this portion of the class will be like studying for your LSAT. Here's another one. This one actually, so here's how logic could be helpful in real life. And I taught this in this lecture last fall, and I had a student come up to me and said this exact thing had happened to her. So here's a dishonest mechanic. If the battery is dead, then the car won't start. The car won't start, so let's replace the battery. Okay, so this is a car mechanic who's trying to sell you a new battery. Okay, is his reasoning sound? Is this a valid argument or an invalid argument? Let's break down his argument. If the battery is dead, then the car won't start. And you go, okay, well that's true. And you know the car won't start, therefore the battery's dead. Hey, sounds good, right? No. You might be shelling out, how much the batteries cost? Between $80 and $120. You'll be wasting that money because it's not necessarily the battery. It's invalid. Deceptive reasoning. Let's go back. So this is using, again, the affirming the consequent pattern. So if the battery is dead, if A, then B, it's affirming the consequent. If B, therefore A. And that is not the valid pattern. It's a bad pattern of reasoning. It's true that if the battery is dead, then the car won't start. But there are other reasons the car won't start other than the battery being dead. So you can't infer that the battery is dead just from the fact that the car won't start. So, and this person had this happen, and it turned out it wasn't the battery. And she bought a new battery for nothing. Okay, here's another example. Okay, so in an invalid argument, there could be circumstances where the premises are true, but the conclusion is false. So that's another way to think about it. So let's look at this argument. If lemons are red, then lemons have a color. Lemons have a color, so lemons are red. Okay, so let's think about this. So in a valid argument, if the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. You're locked in there. So is there a way for this to be true? If lemons are red, then lemons have a color. Okay, well, that's true. That's tautologous, of course. Lemons have a color, so lemons are red. So can you make 1 true and 2 true, but 3 false? So this is the counterexample method. And it's really easy with things like lemons and colors because you're familiar with that. But this will help you kind of grasp what's going on here. If lemons are red, then lemons have a color. Lemons have a color, so lemons are red. How can you make 1 true and 2 true, but 3 false? Well, it's true that if lemons are red, then lemons have a color. Lemons have a color. Let's say lemons are purple. Lemons are yellow. Lemons are blue. Lemons are any other color than red. Would make 1 true and 2 true, but 3 false. So this is invalid. Here are some purple lemons. Those I think are either dyed or that's photoshopped. Let's see. I have a pink lemonade tree. The lemons are supposed to be pink if I ever get lemons off the tree. Let's see. Okay, so this is, again, this is the fallacy of affirming the consequent. If A, then B, B, then A. Modus ponens should be if A, then B, A, then B. Lemons are red, therefore lemons have a color. So these two are switched here, and this is invalid. Okay, next one. Okay, so that concludes our talk about modus ponens and its pretender affirming the consequent. So now let's talk about modus tollens and its pretender denying the antecedent. So this is modus tollens. It looks like this: if P then Q, not Q, then not P. All right, so if you could jot that down or have your book open to refer to this as we look at these other examples. So here's an example of modus tollens. If Larry went to work today, then he would take the truck. There's Larry's truck. Larry didn't take the truck, therefore Larry did not go to work today. This is valid. It follows modus tollens. If P then Q, not Q, then not P. If P then Q, not Q, then not P, modus tollens. And if 1 is 2 and 2 is true, 3 follows necessarily, and the argument is sound. Good, valid argument. Okay, how about this one? If it's raining, the park is closed. The park is not closed, therefore it is not raining. This is an example of modus tollens. If P then Q, not Q, not P. Okay, and again, it's valid. Here's another one. So again, a valid argument is one where the premises, if they were true, would guarantee the truth of the conclusion. So here's a modus tollens. If the car is in the lot, then it has California plates. So this is saying that every car in the lot has California plates. If it's in the lot, then it's got to have California plates because every car in the lot has California plates. Natalie's car does not have California plates. Okay, now what can we infer to that? What does 1 and 2 together guarantee? It guarantees that Natalie's car is not in the lot. And you can just see how this follows. That if every car in the lot has California plates and Natalie's car doesn't have California plates, then obviously Natalie's car cannot be in the lot. And there is modus tollens. The truth of 1 and 2 guarantee the truth of 3. I really like how Kevin DePlant does puts the containers together. So what did he say? If the squirrel's in the suitcase, then the squirrel's in the closet. The squirrel's in the suitcase, therefore the squirrel's in the closet. And he puts the squirrel in the suitcase and the closet, and they're all together. So the truth of these two guarantee the truth of three. Okay. Does Natalie's car not having a California plate guarantee that it's not in the lot? Yes, it guarantees that it's not in the lot. If you take the truth of 1 and 2. So you got a valid and sound argument. So that's modus tollens. Here's the invalid modus tollens pretender. It's called denying the antecedent. And you can see it here in the park example if we switch the phrasing around. If it's raining, the park is closed. It's not raining, therefore the park is not closed. So we flip things around. If P then Q, we're going to deny the antecedent, not P, therefore not Q. Real modus tollens says if P then Q, not Q, then not P. I flip these around. And you can just see intuitively why it doesn't follow. If it's raining, then the park is closed. It's not raining, therefore the park is not closed. Well, does the truth of 1 and 2 guarantee the truth of 3? No, because the park could be closed for other reasons besides the rain. So this says that if it's raining, the park will be closed. Raining is a sufficient condition for the park being closed. But there are other reasons the park could be closed. Could be, I don't know, they just sprayed the park with pesticide, or they're, I don't know, redoing the sprinkling system. So, so remember, in an invalid argument, there could be circumstances where the premises are true and the conclusion is false. And that's the counterexample method. Okay. Fallacy of denying the antecedent. So here's another example of the fallacy of denying the antecedent. If someone wins the lottery, then he will be wealthy. Bill Gates did not win the lottery, therefore Bill Gates is not wealthy. Okay, so this uses very familiar examples, so it's easy to see the counterexample here. This is committing the fallacy of denying the antecedent. If someone wins the lottery, then he will be wealthy. If P, then Q, not P, therefore not Q. That's the bad pattern. And then you can use the counterexample argument to show that just because someone does not win the lottery doesn't mean that they're not wealthy. You could make 1 true and 2 true, but the conclusion false. So it's true if someone wins the lottery, then they'll be wealthy. True. It's true that Bill Gates did not win the lottery, but it's not the case. This 3 is false. And you could easily see that. So we know this argument is invalid. Here again is the fallacy of denying the antecedent. If P then Q, not P, therefore not Q. That's fallacious. Modus tollens, the valid form of this says if P then Q, not Q, therefore not P. Okay, invalid. Okay, here's another one. If there is life on a planet, then there is water. This is harder because the example isn't so down to earth. We all know that Bill Gates is wealthy for this one. This one, we're not as familiar with water on Mars. If there is life on a planet, then there is water. And there is no life on Mars. Therefore, there is no water on Mars. Wow, so this is pretty tricky. And you can you can either come up with a counterexample, or you can just look at the form. If there is life on a planet, if P, then Q. There's no life on a planet, not P, therefore not Q. Well, no, that's the fallacy of denying the antecedent. The counterexample method, if there's life on a planet, then there is water. That's true. And there's no life on Mars. True. Well, actually, it turns out that it's false. There is water on Mars, or there was water on Mars. I think there might actually I don't know the science right now. I think there's water on Mars. So it turns out that this is true and this is true, but that's false. So there could be water on a planet with no life. You don't just need water to have life. There are other things, other necessary conditions for life on a planet. Okay. Okay, so conditional arguments, modus ponens. Okay, so this is a summary of what we've talked about. Here's modus ponens. If P then Q, P then Q. Therefore Q, that's modus ponens. Modus tollens. If P then Q. Not Q, therefore not P. Modus tollens. Those two are valid. Here are the invalid pretenders. If P then Q, Q, therefore P. That is affirming the consequent. And here's the invalid pretender of modus tollens, affirming, denying the antecedent, not P, therefore not Q. And these four forms are in on the back cover of your textbook. The famous forms, modus ponens, modus tollens, and their pretenders. Okay, and again, if you're taking the LSAT, you should memorize these backwards and forwards. These are invalid. Okay, let's talk about the two more famous forms, hypothetical syllogism and disjunctive syllogism. Hypothetical syllogism. It goes like this: if A then B, if B then C, therefore if A then C. So it's a lot like, oh, I forgot the theorem in geometry. I can't remember. If A then B, B then C then, okay. If it rains, I'll be depressed. If I'm depressed, I'll eat a lot of candy. Therefore, if it rains, I'll eat a lot of candy. Really straightforward. Here's another example. If it's an animal, then it's a living thing. If it's a living thing, then it has moral value. Therefore, if it's an animal, then it has moral value. Here again, if it's an A, then it's a B. If it's a B, then it's a C. Therefore, it's an A. If it's an A, then it's a C. Hypothetical syllogism. Here's another example, and this is an example from the back of your book. If Ajax steals the money, he will go to jail. If A, then B. If Ajax goes to jail, his family will suffer. If B, then C. Therefore, A, then C. If A, then C. Therefore, if Ajax steals the money, his family will suffer. Hypothetical syllogism. And it just, it's pretty straightforward how that follows. So, there's not a name for the invalid form of hypothetical syllogism because it's so straightforward. It's kind of hard to trick people. But in general, if you get if you get the pieces out of order. So if you did, if A then B, B then C, A then C. If you reversed C, if you said if C then A, or if you let's see, if you reverse these, if C then B, and then you said A then C, if you got some of these backwards, then it would be an invalid form. So I had to look hard to find one that would be tricky enough, because most of them would just sound ridiculous. So I found one here that could possibly trick someone. And I made the A part red, the B part blue, the C part yellow. So if A then B, if B then C, and then I did, instead of A then C, I did C then A. So that makes this invalid. So let me read it to you. If I am morally responsible, then I can choose between good and evil. If I can choose between good and evil, then some of my actions are free. Therefore, if some of my actions are free, I am morally responsible. This is invalid. What this should say is, if I am morally responsible, then some of my actions are free. So there's an example. And this is just super easy. You just need to memorize the argument form and just sub in, just write letters. So write A above the A parts and B above the B parts, and make sure all the phrases, all the letters, all the phrases are plugged in for the right letters. Okay, here's famous form number 4, and I think it's the easiest. And I actually heard a talk by a philosopher of cognitive science that argued that that mice actually understand disjunctive syllogisms. So if mice can understand disjunctive syllogisms, so can you. So this is an example of how they know mice understand disjunctive syllogisms. So the mouse can smell the cheese, so the mouse says the cheese is on the left side of the maze, or the cheese is on the right side of the maze. The mouse goes and explores the whole right side of the maze, doesn't find the cheese, so the mouse knows that it must be on the left side. It doesn't go back and explore the right side again. It goes to the left side and explores. So, so animals, mammals, they understand disjunctive syllogism. And the form is really easy. It says A or B, and then not A or not B, so one or the other, and then it rules out one side, therefore it must be the other side. Okay, here's another one. The test will tell me if I'm pregnant or not pregnant. It's not pregnant, therefore I am pregnant. So really simple, straightforward reasoning. In order for the argument to be sound, it really has to be an either or here. So a lot of things aren't just either or. It's hard to find them. So pregnancy is you're either pregnant or you're not. You're not pregnant. It's not that one. Cross that out. So it has to be this other one. So for this to be sound, so this is a valid form, but in order for it to be sound, this has to be true. How can it be true? Well, it has to be the case that something is black or white. It's one or the other. There's only two options. Okay, here's some practice questions. Here's Bill Gates again. Oh, shoot. It's telling you already it's invalid. Okay, well, if someone wins the lottery, then he or she would be wealthy. Bill Gates is wealthy. Therefore, Bill Gates won the lottery. Okay, valid or invalid? Well, it's invalid. Well, why? This is the fallacy of affirming the consequent. So, and you can use the counterexample method to say that this is true and this is true, but this is false. And that will tell you, that guarantees, if you can find the first premise is true, the second premise is true, and the third premise is false, the conclusion is false, you know that the argument's invalid. So we know Bill Gates did not win the lottery. So this argument is invalid. Here is the fallacy of affirming the consequent. The pretender of the famous form, modus ponens. All right, next one. Valid or invalid? If she is a violinist, then she is a musician. She is a violinist, therefore she is a musician. So I'll give you a second. Is this a valid argument or an invalid argument? Valid, it's valid. It follows the form of modus ponens. Okay, here's another one. If it's a living thing, then it needs water. Roses are things that need water. Therefore, roses are living things. Is this valid or invalid? If it's a P, then it's a Q. It's a Q, therefore it's a P. So this is invalid because it is following the pretender affirming the consequent. All right, what about this one? If Dracula is a vampire, then he is dangerous and you should not spend the night at his castle. Okay, so what premise should I put in here to complete the argument? He is dangerous and you should not spend the night at his castle. A, Dracula is not a vampire. B, Dracula is dangerous. C, Dracula is a vampire. D, Dracula is not dangerous. The answer is C, Dracula is a vampire. If Dracula is a vampire, then he is dangerous and you should not spend the night at his castle. hey, Dracula is a vampire, then it follows that he's dangerous and you should not spend the night at his castle. So C is the right answer, and it's the modus ponens form. What about this one? If spiders have eternal souls, then it's wrong to kill them. Okay, what premise goes there? Therefore, spiders do not have eternal souls. It is not wrong to kill them. A. It is wrong to kill spiders. Spiders have eternal souls, or spiders do not have eternal souls. Actually, technically, there are two right answers here. D is correct. So it's not the answer I was looking for, but what follows from spiders do not have eternal souls? Well, you can always restate the same thing. Spiders do not have eternal souls. But it follows trivially that if A, then A. If spiders do not have eternal souls, then spiders do not have eternal souls. So D would make this argument valid. But that's not what I was looking for. If spiders have eternal souls, then it's wrong to kill them. It's not wrong to kill spiders, A, therefore spiders do not have eternal souls. Now, this is a valid, so B makes this, A makes this argument valid, but it does not necessarily make the argument sound. So it could be that it is wrong to kill spiders. It could be that if spiders have eternal souls, then it's wrong to kill them. It could be that one is not true. It could be that you think that it's irrelevant whether spiders have eternal souls or not. Okay, so again, validity and soundness are often two separate questions. Here's another one. If Mary is a psychiatrist, then she's a physician. Mary is not a physician. What follows from that? If Mary is a psychiatrist, then she's a physician. Mary's not a physician, therefore Mary is a psychiatrist, A. Mary is not a psychiatrist. Mary is not a physician. Mary is a physician. And again, there are two right answers here. It follows trivially from Mary is not a physician that Mary is not a physician. So C follows. But what I'm looking for is B. Mary is not a psychiatrist. Okay, next one. Here we go. If Jack is a dog, then he likes dog food. If Jack likes dog food, then he is disgusting. What follows from that? What follows from that? So this is a hypothetical syllogism. What follows from it? If A, then C. If Jack is a dog, then he's disgusting. But obviously, this is an unsound argument because obviously this little dog cannot be disgusting. But it is valid but not sound. So if Jack is a dog, then he likes dog food. If Jack likes dog food, then he's disgusting. Therefore, if Jack is a dog, Jack is disgusting. Okay. Here's another one. Either virtue is good for its own sake or it's a means to an end. Virtue is not good for its own sake. Therefore, what follows? Here's a hint. This is a disjunctive syllogism. It's an either-or argument. Virtue is not good for its own sake, so virtue is a means to an end. And that's the conclusion. Okay. So here's a summary of what we've looked at. What does it mean for something to be valid? The premises, if they were true, would guarantee the truth of the conclusion. If the argument's invalid, it is possible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. So you can test, this is the counterexample method, you can test for invalidity by thinking of a case where the premises are, saying that premise is true, that premise is true, and then thinking of a case where the conclusion is false. Here's some valid forms: modus ponens, modus tollens, hypothetical syllogism, and disjunctive syllogism. Here are two famous invalid forms. They're pretenders of modus ponens and modus tollens, affirming the consequent and denying the antecedent. And soundness, or sound, an argument sound if the argument form is valid and all the premises are true. So there you go.